They called it a partnership, a bond between human and animal, forged in mutual respect and understanding. That's what the brochures promised, anyway. In reality, Sophie, Elen, and Aerys, the bottlenose dolphin, were bound together by something far less idyllic: captivity. For Aerys, born in the controlled environment of Coral Vista Marine Park, the vast, unknowable ocean was merely a whispered legend, a story passed down, perhaps, in the clicks and whistles of her pod. Her world was the performance tank, a shimmering, chlorinated stage meticulously crafted to evoke the feeling of the ocean, but offering none of its freedom. Sophie, on the other hand, came from a different world entirely. A world where the ocean was tangible, salty, and alive. Growing up on the Florida coast, she spent her childhood exploring tide pools, rescuing stranded seabirds, and developing a deep, almost spiritual connection to the marine world. She wasn't drawn to the glamour of marine parks. She was drawn to the animals. After university, she applied to Coral Vista with the best of intentions, hoping to improve the lives of the creatures within its walls, to be a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Aerys was already a star when Sophie arrived. Graceful, intelligent, and seemingly eager to please, she was the park's main attraction, the linchpin of the Ocean Dreams show. From day one, Sophie was captivated. There was something about Aerys's eyes, a depth, a knowingness that went beyond mere trained response. She saw not just a performer, but an individual. Initially, Sophie thrived. She learned Aerys's routines, mastered the complex system of hand signals and whistles, and quickly developed a rapport with the dolphin. She believed, naively perhaps, that she could make a difference, that she could enrich Aerys's life, even within the confines of the tank. She dedicated herself to creating enrichment activities, varying the training regime, and spending hours simply observing Aerys, learning her individual quirks and preferences. But cracks soon began to appear in Sophie's idealistic facade. The relentless schedule of performances, the pressure to maintain perfect attendance, the constant blare of music and applause, it all took its toll on both Sophie and Aerys. Sophie began to notice subtle changes in Aerys's behavior, a slight hesitation before a jump, a decreased interest in her favorite toys, a weariness in her eyes that mirrored Sophie's own growing unease. The seeds of trouble were sown in the very foundation of their relationship. It was a relationship built on control, on the expectation of performance, on the inherent inequality between human and animal. While Sophie genuinely cared for Aerys, she was still an instrument of the park's agenda, a cog in a machine designed to generate profit, not to prioritize animal welfare. The management at Coral Vista, led by the unyielding Victor Hale, cared little for Sophie's concerns. To them, Aerys was an asset, a commodity to be exploited for maximum financial gain. Rest days were seen as lost revenue, enrichment activities as unnecessary expenses. Sophie's growing anxieties were dismissed as sentimentality, her warnings ignored as the ramblings of an overzealous trainer. The more Sophie saw, the more disillusioned she became. She witnessed dolphins punished for failing to perform, their food rations withheld as a form of correction. She saw the same routines repeated endlessly, day after day, until the animals moved with a robotic, almost zombified precision. The initial spark of joy she had felt slowly eroded, replaced by a gnawing sense of guilt and helplessness. And then there were the whispers, the stories of other trainers who had raised concerns only to be silenced, demoted, or even fired. Sophie realized that speaking out meant risking her job, her career, her very livelihood. But the alternative, remaining silent and complicit in Aerys's suffering, was becoming unbearable. The problem wasn't just the long hours or the repetitive routines. It was the fundamental lack of respect for Aerys as a living being. She was treated like a machine, a performing prop, her needs and desires secondary to the demands of the show. Sophie knew that Aerys was more than just a collection of tricks and jumps. She was intelligent, sensitive, and capable of experiencing a wide range of emotions. But no one seemed to care. The pressure mounted. Sophie found herself caught between her conscience and her career, torn between her loyalty to Aerys and her fear of retribution. She documented everything, meticulously recording Aerys's declining health and her own growing concerns in detailed reports. But these reports were often buried, ignored, or even actively suppressed by Victor Hale and his team. As the weeks turned into months, the situation grew increasingly dire. Sophie knew that something had to change, that Aerys was reaching her breaking point. But she felt powerless to stop the relentless cycle of performances, the endless demands, the suffocating pressure. The bond between them, once a source of hope and inspiration, was now strained, fragile, and teetering on the brink of collapse. A bond forged not in the boundless freedom of the ocean, but in the restrictive confines of a tank, in the silent language of captivity. It was a bond destined, perhaps, to break in the most tragic way imaginable. The cracks were showing long before that final, fateful performance. Sophie, bless her, wasn't blind. She documented everything, meticulous as always, but in the high-pressure environment of Coral Vista, her concerns were like whispers in a hurricane. The mantra was simple, brutally so. The show must go on. It started subtly. Aerys, usually a powerhouse of energy, began lagging behind during rehearsals. The effortless leaps that had once defined her act became labored, strained. Her breathing was heavier, her responses a fraction of a second slower. These weren't catastrophic failures, not yet, but they were clear deviations from the norm. Red flags waving in Sophie's worried mind. Sophie meticulously recorded each instance in her daily logs. Aerys' decreased appetite, the slight tremor in her dorsal fin, indicators of stress that any attentive trainer would notice. But her reports were met with polite nods and dismissive comments. "She's just having an off week, Sophie," Victor would say, his tone laced with forced cheerfulness. "They all have them. Don't read too much into it." But Sophie did read into it. She understood Aerys' nuances, the subtle shifts in her mood and behavior. This wasn't just an off week. This was a sustained decline, a desperate plea for rest. The problem, the upcoming summer season, was critical. Revenue targets loomed large, and Aerys was the star attraction, the guaranteed crowd pleaser. Pulling her from the lineup, even for a few days, was simply not an option in Victor's eyes. The financial ramifications were, to him, far more significant than the well-being of a single dolphin. Sophie pushed harder. During one particularly tense staff meeting, she presented a compelling case, outlining Aerys' symptoms, comparing her current performance to archival footage, highlighting the alarming discrepancies. "She's not performing because she wants to," Sophie argued, her voice trembling slightly. "She's performing because she's forced to. We need to give her a break before something serious happens." Victor's response was chilling. He didn't raise his voice, didn't even meet Sophie's gaze. He simply reiterated the schedule, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a consistent performance schedule. He then dropped the hammer. Any further complaints about Aerys' condition, he implied, would be viewed as insubordination. Sophie was cornered. She knew what happened to trainers who challenged the status quo. They were quietly shuffled aside, their roles diminished, their voices effectively silenced. She couldn't risk losing her job, not just for her own sake, but for Aerys. She needed to be there, a constant advocate, even if her power was waning. So she adapted. She subtly adjusted the routine, shortening certain segments, simplifying the more strenuous maneuvers, trying to ease Aerys' burden without making it obvious. She spent extra time with Aerys outside of performances, offering gentle massages, speaking soothingly, hoping to alleviate some of the stress that was visibly consuming the dolphin. But it wasn't enough. The relentless pressure, the blaring music, the flashing lights, it was all taking its toll. Aerys grew increasingly listless, her once bright eyes now clouded with a dull, weary resignation. In the days leading up to the tragedy, Sophie noticed a disturbing new development. Aerys was exhibiting signs of disorientation. During one rehearsal, she missed a cue entirely, swimming in the wrong direction, colliding with the tank wall with a sickening thud. Sophie immediately halted the session, her heart pounding with dread. She begged Victor to call in a specialist, but her request was denied. She just needs to focus. Sophie, Victor snapped, his patience wearing thin. Stop babying her and get her back in the water. The final straw came the night before the fatal performance. Aerys refused to eat, a rare occurrence that sent alarm bells ringing in Sophie's head. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Her skin felt clammy to the touch. Sophie contacted the on-call veterinarian, Dr. Evans, expressing her grave concerns. Dr. Evans, a kind but ultimately powerless figure, examined Aerys briefly, noting Sophie's observations. But then Victor arrived, his presence radiating impatience and authority. "We have a sold-out show tomorrow, Dr. Evans," he declared, cutting short the examination. "We can't afford for Aerys to be out of commission." Sophie pleaded with him, her voice desperate. "She's sick, Victor. She's clearly not well. We can't put her through this." Victor ignored her, turning to Dr. Evans with a cold, calculated expression. "Administer the stimulant," he ordered. Sophie gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "No, you can't be serious. That's insane. You're just masking the problem, not solving it." Victor's eyes hardened. "It's a mild dose, Sophie, just enough to get her through the show. She'll be fine." Dr. Evans, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated for a moment before reluctantly complying. Sophie watched in horror as the needle pierced Aerys' skin, the drug coursing through her veins. A brief, unnatural surge of energy washed over the dolphin, a fleeting illusion of vitality masking the underlying exhaustion. Sophie knew then that they had crossed a line, a point of no return. They had prioritized profit over compassion, spectacle over well-being, and in doing so, they had sealed their fate. The show would go on, but the price would be devastatingly high. And Sophie, trapped in this nightmare of her making, could only stand by and watch as the tragedy unfolded, powerless to stop it. The delicate trust between her and Aerys began to fray, replaced by the cold, creeping tendrils of dread. The final performance was not just a show, it was an execution, and they were all complicit. The immediate aftermath was a storm of grief and fury. News outlets plastered Sophie's image across screens, a vibrant woman with a radiant smile, now tragically gone. The footage, shaky and incomplete as it was, spread like wildfire online. The moment Aerys breached, The agonizing seconds Sophie was dragged under, the frantic attempts at rescue, all played out again and again, each view a fresh wound. Coral Vista Marine Park became ground zero for public outrage. Protesters descended, armed with signs demanding justice for Sophie and freedom for Aerys. Chants of "Empty the tanks" and "Sophie's law" now echoed through the air, a chorus of grief and defiance aimed squarely at the park's gates. The carefully curated image of family-friendly entertainment crumbled, revealing a darker truth beneath the surface. Online, the fury was even more visceral. Social media platforms became battlegrounds. #JusticeForSophie trended worldwide, a digital memorial fueled by anger and sorrow. Threads dissected every detail of the tragedy, scrutinizing the park's safety protocols, its history of animal welfare violations, and, most damningly, Victor Hale's role in the events leading up to Sophie's death. The damning evidence mounted quickly. First, the anonymous tip from a junior handler, revealing Sophie's repeated warnings about Aerys's declining health and the pressure she faced to keep the show running. Then came the leaked security footage, the irrefutable proof of Victor's callous disregard for Aerys's well-being and Sophie's desperate pleas. The stimulant injection became a symbol of the park's negligence, a blatant example of prioritizing profit over animal welfare. The public backlash was swift and severe. Ticket sales plummeted, corporate sponsors severed ties, local businesses distanced themselves from the park. The once thriving entertainment venue became a pariah, its reputation irreparably tarnished. But the outrage wasn't just directed at Coral Vista. It ignited a broader conversation about the ethics of marine parks and animal captivity. Animal welfare organizations, emboldened by public support, launched aggressive campaigns, demanding stricter regulations and an end to cetacean performances. Former trainers, many silenced by non-disclosure agreements and fear of professional repercussions, began to speak out. They shared harrowing stories of overworked animals, ignored medical concerns, and the relentless pressure to maintain the illusion of harmony, regardless of the cost. A pattern emerged, a disturbing narrative of systemic neglect and exploitation across the industry. The legal repercussions were swift, albeit slow by comparison. The Lane family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Coral Vista Marine Park and Victor Hale, alleging negligence, recklessness, and a failure to protect their employee. The Department of Wildlife Welfare launched a formal investigation, scrutinizing the park's permits, safety protocols, and animal care practices. Criminal charges were a possibility, depending on the findings of the investigation. Victor Hale, initially defiant in his public statements, was placed on administrative leave, his carefully constructed facade of concern shattered by the weight of evidence and public condemnation. He retreated from the spotlight, his future uncertain, his reputation ruined. Amidst the legal battles and public outcry, a quieter tragedy unfolded within the park itself. Aerys, isolated and listless, became a symbol of the tragedy's lingering impact. She refused to eat, ignored her trainers, and spent most of her time floating motionless in her tank. A stark contrast to the energetic performer she once was. Experts speculated that Aerys was suffering from a combination of physical exhaustion, neurological distress, and profound grief. The bond between her and Sophie had been undeniable, a partnership built on years of trust and mutual affection. Sophie's sudden and violent death had undoubtedly traumatized Aerys, leaving her emotionally and psychologically scarred. The park, struggling to salvage its image, announced plans to relocate Aerys to a protected ocean sanctuary. A belated attempt to demonstrate remorse and address public concerns. But for many, it was too little, too late. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably broken. Sophie Lane's death became a catalyst for change. It sparked a national conversation about the ethics of animal captivity, the responsibility of entertainment venues, and the importance of prioritizing animal welfare over profit. Her name became synonymous with compassion, advocacy, and the fight for a more humane world. The Sophie Lane Foundation was established by her family and friends, dedicated to promoting responsible animal care, supporting marine research, and advocating for stricter regulations in the animal entertainment industry. The foundation quickly gained momentum, attracting donations from around the world and becoming a powerful voice for change. Sophie's legacy extended beyond legal battles and policy reforms. It inspired a new generation of animal activists, researchers, and trainers committed to creating a more ethical and sustainable future for marine life. Her story served as a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, hope can endure, and that even the smallest voice can spark a movement for change. The fight for justice for Sophie and freedom for Aerys was far from over. But the seeds of change had been planted. The world was watching, and the silence had been broken.